From Art Spirits comes an exciting announcement in the form of a reissue of their Hyper Solid series Shin Godzilla figure. Both versions of this figure are slated for a fourth quarter 2024 release date. At the time of this recording, I actually have not seen these figures listed on the usual series of websites that I usually pull from for pre-orders, but I actually found this on Instagram from an account that I follow. But I think that you can expect to see these figures pop up on those general retail sites probably within the next couple of weeks or months. So to my understanding, I believe this figure was initially released back in 2017. There may have been one reissue around 2019, I could be mistaken, but I wanted to make a video on this figure because I actually originally had this figure pre-ordered, I think maybe around 2018, 2019 from Big Bad Toy Store, and then for some reason at the time I decided to cancel that pre-order. And for anyone who's familiar with this figure, either version, the red version or the Atomic Breath purple version, these figures are ridiculously expensive in the aftermarket, and to my knowledge, there's only been maybe the one reissue like I mentioned before. So this announcement to me just really got my heart pumping. Anyone who's followed this channel for any bit of time knows that Shin Godzilla is my favorite. I'm a fanatic. I say this basically every video, but this is one of those figures that as time passed, I just really wanted to get my hands on. And in my experience looking in the aftermarket over the years, I haven't seen this thing go for anything less than $600-700 up to even $1,000, which is preposterous because this is not that big of a figure. To my understanding, I think it's maybe, not counting the tail, maybe around 8-ish inches tall. Counting the top of the tail, the tip of the tail, I think about 10.5 inches. We'll get into the specs shortly, but as you could understand, I am so excited that this is finally becoming something that I could get my hands on at retail price. And just as an aside, 2024 really seems to be the resurgence, pun intended, of Shin Godzilla reissues. Aside from this figure, we of course have the X Plus Sakai sculpt that is being reissued in the orthochromatic and red light up colorway. So definitely for anyone who's interested in those and is able to get them, do it, because if you missed out on that Sakai sculpt, it is 100% worth the hype. One of the best figures I've ever laid my eyes on, that I've had the pleasure of even having in my collection. So definitely don't hesitate to get either version, if not both. Of course, we also have the SH Monster Arts orthochromatic Shin Godzilla. But circling back to this specific figure, of course, it's been out for a few years now, so you can find some reviews on YouTube and probably other websites as well. But I figure for people who are not as familiar with it, to go over it in detail. Of course, I'm very excited. So let's take a closer look at this figure. For starters, to clarify, there are two versions, the purple Atomic Breath version and then the red version, the more traditional red and black look. They're both the same figure, just different colorways. Both versions include the same accessories, which is a stand that I believe includes a name base as well for the title of the film. And there are also two alternative, I guess they're head sculpts, not just mouthpieces, but two head sculpts. Both head sculpts are open mouth versions. So you can see here in the photos that we're going to cycle through, there's the regular, more roaring sculpt, I guess you could say. And then there's the split jaw version that you can alternate. So for all intents and purposes, this is the same figure, the only difference being the colorway, if you prefer the more red and black look or the Atomic Breath purple look. Personally, I'm going for the red and black look. This is the one I had pre-ordered years back. But I do think that this Atomic Breath purple version kind of benefits this sculpt better. I was almost inclined to get both versions, but I'm still going to stick with at least this red and black look. So first, let's look at the Atomic Breath one, this purple one, because I think this is the one a lot of people might lean more toward. Right out the gate, let's start with what I think is the money shot of this figure. So apologies in advance for the low quality. I don't know why this is so low quality. I just pulled pictures from the internet. The other ones I have of the red and black version are much more clear, but you get the gist with this figure. I do think that this image here perfectly captures the full silhouette of it, right? So you could see Shin is very much leaning forward, but one of the things about this figure in particular, I think among many Shin Godzilla figures I've seen over the years, is that this has such an action-oriented tail pose. I absolutely love the look of this tail. I think that if the tail wasn't as interesting visually as it is, I might not be as inclined to get this figure, but that's what helps make this one so different from the majority of other Shin Godzilla figures. The overall sculpt itself very much feels like an action pose. And with this particular picture, we do have the split jaw here on display, which I think looks perfect. This whole purple aesthetic, the tail pose, the split jaw, wonderful. Looks absolutely amazing. Like I said, Shin is very much leaning forward in this pose. I like the way that Art Spirits really didn't hesitate to kind of exaggerate the movement of Shin in this particular sculpt. And with the tail, you can see that from this side that we're looking at, it does curve. It kind of comes out and then goes back the other way. So now let's move on to another photo to get a better sense of what this tail looks like. So this is kind of the back side of the figure here. So Shin is kind of turned looking that way, but now you could really get a full sense of what this tail pose looks like. This is just glorious. I don't know if the tail is exactly proportional to what it is in the film. It looks like it is at some point with certain figures, especially when they start to curve like this, the tail. It's hard to gauge if this is the true length. But being that this figure seems slightly exaggerated as it is, I think that this ridiculously long tail with this very visually striking curve works perfectly for this figure. And in this particular image, it looks like the purple is emanating very nicely. It kind of gives that sense of radiation glowing out of Shin's body. And here's one more angle of particularly the tail again. Really getting a full sense of it. Apologies again for the low quality. It's kind of irking me as I'm recording this video. We'll get to the higher quality images momentarily. Just going to kind of run through these Atomic Breath purple versions quickly now. And then here's a front-facing shot with the nameplate on a sort of like rock base. I don't know if Shin's foot is on this or if it's meant to just be displayed in front of the figure. I used to think it was meant for Shin's foot to go on top of. It does kind of look like he's just right behind the base. Someone who knows better can correct me if I'm wrong. This front-facing shot looks great as well. You can see how the tail really comes out to the right of Shin and bends back in. From this angle, I don't know how far to the right it really would be. Of course, photography can work wonders with these things. So you can really make this tail, I think, look like it's going in a bunch of different directions, which is really exciting to me because most of the time, Shin tails don't exactly capture that constant movement that's so present in the film. And here is a close-up of that split jaw portrait. This looks really imposing, very intimidating. Shin, of course, has those blank silver eyes here, but those brows look so furrowed. He looks so angry in this, which is cool. I love it. And another detail that's represented on this figure that is not often represented in other Shin figures is the teeth on top of the head. We don't see that often. In fact, majority of my Shin figures in my collection don't capture that detail. One more photo before we move on to the red and black version is this low-angled look at, again, the split jaw look of this figure. I do want to highlight here the paint apps look really good. It almost looks like it's semi-translucent here. That purple has a sort of translucent effect. It could just be really amazing paint work. But also what I want to call out here is the way that the red is implemented here near the chest and arms also gives this really natural glow effect. Again, the figure is a little bit exaggerated. Yes, it's not super realistic, but it does create this sort of gradient of colors throughout Shin that, again, really gives that idea that he's emanating this radiation. Now we move on to the much higher quality images. Just as a heads up, you might notice the Sideshow Collectibles logo on the bottom left of the majority of these pictures. I pulled them from the Sideshow site back when this figure was available on that site from a couple years back. Here's the same angle that we started with when we were looking at the Atomic Breath version. Again, same figure, just a difference of color. I think that this red version also greatly captures that red glow on the figure. The chest in particular and that neck area looks so natural in certain shots. I do think that at certain points it does look a little bit painted, but I think it suits it very well. This red version of the figure kind of reminds me of Shin in the climax of the film when they're dropping the buildings or bombing the buildings on him. And with these much higher quality photos, we can take a closer look at the great detail on this figure. So as we move in a little bit closer, you can get a better sense of the sculpt work that is going on here. All the wonderful texture of Shin Godzilla seems to be captured here. This is a very nice sculpt, particularly the leg area. You could see all that detail in there. And as we look down at the feet too, you could see those toenails are wonderfully captured. We work our way back up here. I love the arm pose too. This gives that sense of him pulling forward and screaming or shooting his breath. And I have to say, once we reach this chest, shoulder, neck, dorsal area, there are so many varying textures going on here. You could see like the musculature of Shin's, particularly like in that shoulder, bicep area, and then the striations on the chest and the muscles that kind of very distinctly make its way up the neck. This is such a interesting area in terms of the sculpt because there's so much going on. Absolutely love it. I think they captured it so well. And we make our way up to the head here. That mouth, a very distinct red, almost a shade of pink even. And the teeth have a nice, what looks to be yellowish paint application. Here's a close-up of this glorious screaming mouth here. It looks so grotesque. I absolutely love this. You'll notice that this figure here, I believe both head sculpts on the red version have the eyes open with the pupils there. So as opposed to the Atomic Breath version that has the silver coating over the eyes. That's a very small detail, but I think it's the only distinction between the two figures outside of course, the purple paint scheme for the Atomic Breath one. Very good sense here of the paintwork on this figure. We have the distinctly yellow looking teeth, but what's interesting to me is that the mouth itself kind of has this almost wet effect, which is really gross, but adds a sort of gory appearance to Shin's mouth. And of course, we have those strange textures inside his mouth as well. As we work our way a little bit up to the actual face, Shin looks like he's almost done in a gray color, but I do think that's the lighting. I'm sure he's a little bit darker. It's just like kind of the highlights on the figure itself. Get a closer look at the eyes, the nose, the teeth you could see on top of the head there. Here's a close-up of the tip of the tail. At a glance, this looks relatively screen accurate, and much like the rest of the figure, there seems to be no detail lost in this sculpt at all. Absolutely grotesque, perfectly captures that mixture of bone, muscle, and whatever else is going on here. Absolutely disgusting, but so cool. With this angle here, you can get a better sense again of the sculpt. I like the lighting on this one here. Shin again appears almost to be gray, but that is very much the lighting. But you can see all the varying texture throughout the entire figure, from the tail, the legs, the body, the dorsals, the mouth. Such an impressive silhouette. This has one of the most impressive silhouettes to me, I think, from any Shin Godzilla figure or statue that I've seen. So outside of what I've already said, there's not too much else to say. I'm just really excited for this figure. This is the definition of one of those things where I really feel like I missed out on this one when I canceled my pre-order years back, and it's just something that I've regretted for ages. And it's a funny coincidence, I guess, that this reissue occurs, because recently I've really been thinking about this figure and checking in on eBay to see listings for it. So this is a great opportunity for me, a great opportunity for you collectors out there who might be interested in this one too. Like I said, since this figure's been out for years at this point, you could find some reviews on YouTube to get a better sense of the actual dimensions in hand and what it looks like compared to some other figures for size comparison. If you are interested in purchasing this, like I said, I don't see them available yet on any sites that I've been looking at, but if you really wanted to, you can contact the Instagram account that I actually pre-ordered this figure through. This is the account here. I've been following them for years, but this is my actual first time buying from them. But from what I can see, you know, they're legitimate. They've been very communicative, and it seems like a legit account. So I would say if you're interested and you're itching to get this pre-order in, you can get it through this account here on Instagram. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this figure. Let me know in the comments if you have either version of this figure already, and if not, will you be pre-ordering it? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new to the channel and you like the content, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and taking a look at my other Godzilla figure content on the channel as well. Lastly, thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.